Welcome to Permission to Evolve. I'm your host, Brandon Thielk. I'm a performance and life coach. I am joined by my co host and producer, Holly Shane. So, last time we talked about this idea to have permission to make mistakes and why that's important. And today we're going to be getting into the permission to admit fault. It's always kind of running up against the ego. That's what this work is. Many of us can be stubborn and not wanting to admit fault, but it really helps transform relationships. It creates a lot of clarity and it helps us kind of work through a lot of the wounds that, maybe we've experienced. It's under this idea of like gaslighting. I think many of us have experienced that when somebody's not willing to admit fault. And I think to varying degrees, so all of us can be disconnected from reality at one point or another where our interpretation of events was different than somebody else's. There's some disconnects that can naturally happen, but it really is the ownership of when we do make mistakes is super important. Most things can be cleaned up. So that's if we're not willing to take that ownership, that kind of leaves things in this eternal problem. It can be really detrimental, especially over time. These things tend to build. Yeah, it's about clearing the air. It's about growth and forward movement. It's about dissolving the tension in relationships because ultimately our mind is always just seeking understanding. And if there's gaps going on or if our interpretation's off from the other person's and we're kind of butting heads, that doesn't really go anywhere. We can just be kind of stuck in the stance. When we have a standstill, it's actually not a standstill. It's actually a regression because over time, these things gather more and more energy and the intensity grows. So if I'm not resolving situations, it's not just kind of staying there. It's actually growing and subconsciously it's going to be eating away at me in different ways because our heart knows the truth. Our emotions may tell a different story. Our ego may tell a different story. We're trying to get back to truth. That's where the solutions are always at. We're just going to go and explore this, why it's tough to admit fault sometimes, why it's important, the benefits. Just kind of approach this with some curiosity to see what opens up here. I think it is this idea of taking responsibility. It does span just about every area of your life. If you're trying to improve or clean something up, it is going to be more about facing the truth. And sometimes those are hard truths. We all make mistakes. We all have flaws. It's about shifting out of the shame and into self-compassion so that we can open these things up and learn from them. So as we get rolling here, Holly, is there anything that comes to mind to start off for you?
Well, just before we got started, I mentioned this is a really good continuation of what we talked about last week in the being able to make mistakes, and these things kind of go hand in hand. So I think it's a good continuation of that conversation through a slightly different lens because the admitting fault is going to play a little more into like the relationship side. But yeah, I do. It's tough. That can be one of the hardest things is to admit when we're wrong and past just like making a mistake in terms of like a business deal or experimenting with like a new part of life. You could be admitting fault where you hurt somebody in some way.
That can be intentionally or unintentionally. If we're subconsciously driven or unconsciously driven, we might not fully know what we're doing. What we might be acting from a wound, and from that place, there's kind of this collateral damage that we might not be fully aware of. I think it's just important, like as you establish awareness to really open these things up. And you and I often talk about, stressful dynamics, situations where you're kind of searching for your part. And I think that's a powerful thing, but to be like, well, I'm just part of me is gonna believe it's possible that maybe there is something I did here. I think that's important care. I think that's many people are willing to forgive if we're willing to own our part, right? It can just be a huge catalyst to transforming relationships because we're creating an understanding and the hard-headedness, stubbornness, all those things. We're going to get to why those get created, but it really is when we start to surrender the ego a little bit and just kind of in the acceptance of I'm a human being. I make mistakes. I'm flawed. None of us are perfect, but maintaining our image is something that comes at a very young age where we're taught to basically stand strong in our identity, but we may be clinging to some aspects that we actually need to surrender and let go of anyway. So a lot of the times When we're trying to maintain the image, we get caught up in a lot of these old patterns where it's not very practical for us anymore. It actually creates a lot of sabotage too if we're clinging to these things too tightly. So this is a good progression from making mistakes to admitting fault because it really is like the reality is we need to make mistakes. That's how we learn. So the next step to that is when I do make a mistake, intentionally or unintentionally, to hurt another person, it's that willingness to step into that and resolve it so that we can create a better outcome moving forward. So, yeah, super interesting stuff here. I would say every episode we have, it is the common theme of dismantling the ego. It's this system that's designed to protect us. It's who we think we are. And who we think we are is often not something we chose. It's just us getting programmed by society and our upbringing and things like that. It's stuff that we pick up along the way that we internalize and we make who we are. We get very protective over that stuff because we're trying to feel safe. We're trying to earn and receive love. We're trying to feel good about what we've got going on. And if we're not stepping into this ownership piece, things can get out of touch with reality where we might be a little bit delusional, where we're not showing up in relationships or might have this idea that look, everything I'm doing is perfect and it's always the other person's fault. That's just not the case. We all have things we're working on, and we talk a lot about strengthening weaknesses. And weaknesses are just simply like areas where I'm left in the wound. It's where I have negative stories, negative beliefs. I have some pain behind that stuff, and I get reactive around those buttons or triggers. That's where generally, when we act out of alignment and we actually, it has negative consequences on other people, it's us avoiding our pain that's creating that. It's just a reaction of some button got pressed and I have this coping mechanism attached to it where I'm just going to react to something rather than thoughtfully respond. We all have that stuff. And this idea of accumulation of stress. If I have a lot going on in my life, if I'm not sleeping well, if there's family issues, career issues, all these things, it's like that's compounding stress where my self-control starts to diminish. So I'm more reactive from those places when I've got a lot on my plate, when I'm not unpacking these things. Basically, our system just gets overloaded, and then we're more likely to react. We're more likely to do things we're not proud of. That's to try and get relief from that pain that we're experiencing. So the number one idea here is going to be ego protection or your self-identity. So it's this image you're putting out to the world of who you feel like you're supposed to be. And that's somebody that conforms with society and does all the normal stuff. Anything outside of that isn't necessarily accepted, or maybe you feel rejected if you're not operating that way. And we get shamed when we step out of these patterns. We're highly motivated to maintain the system because this is how most people operate. But that system, it comes at a cost. And that is going to be, you're going to be sacrificing parts of yourself in order to align with this system. It's these one size fits all. Oh, everybody needs to function this way. And if you don't, like you're an outcast. That's where all the problems start because now we start trading parts of ourselves in order to exist in that system. This work is about creating some freedom because you can function in society and you can be a normal person, but you can also live authentically too. It's just figuring out how to align your life in a way that makes sense. It's not about I have to go live off in the woods and be secluded. It's more of like how do I navigate situations in a way that I feel like I'm being true to myself. That takes a lot of wrestling with our ego. I'm supposed to be doing this, but I want to do this. So how do I reconcile that? And that's going to be this little bit of tug of war of that's why we need to make mistakes. That's why we need to take some risks is to kind of break out of the cycles, the programming, so that I can step into a truer version for me that's gonna feel better. That's gonna be fulfilling and protecting the ego. If I admit fault, I might think that's a failure, or I might think I'm a bad person. People might look at me differently. There's a lot of studies coming out on this idea of vulnerability now, where it's actually that's how you gain respect from people is when you can admit you're wrong. That's an interesting thing that butts up against these practices that have been normalized of like you're supposed to appear strong and you're supposed to just push forward all the time and maintain this identity. But it's like, well, when I can take a step back, because if I'm doing that, if I just keep pushing forward, it's just like, well, Everybody around me is seeing that there's a problem, but in my own head, I don't think there is. And that's actually when people lose respect for you, is when you refuse to change. Let's say you're causing a lot of problems for other people, but maybe you're more of a authority figure or you're a stronger personality. And so you get your way most of the time. That's going to be at the expense of other people when we're functioning from the wound. It's more about people might obey because you might have reactive emotions where that makes everybody uncomfortable, but at the same time they don't really respect you. It's more of they fear you, and that's not like a healthy pattern to have. If you're only getting what you want because people are terrified of you, that's pretty out of balance, and you're doing a lot of damage. And there's varying degrees to all this stuff. We might see this idea of admitting fault to losing respect from people, but we're making the case for it's actually how you gain respect because it shows self-awareness. It actually increases your authority because you're showing yourself as human, that you're willing to learn and grow. And that actually makes people respect you more when you work on your faults, when you start to strengthen your weaknesses, you start to strengthen the whole foundation. And also the main idea here is it's an attempt to control. So we control situations in order to avoid the pain inside from our past. And as long as I'm living this out, I don't have to look at that, but then I might use these volatile emotions to control other people. And that could even be on the other side. Victimhood emotions can be manipulative too. The poor me stuff where you're getting people to feel bad for you so you can take advantage of them. But that's another dynamic here. So that's also a control structure. It's just the opposite side of kind of being the more of the tyrant. There's a whole spectrum here of everything in between. And the areas where we have the most pain, that's where we're gonna be the most polarized, where we feel like we need to control things more in order to prevent us feeling that. The ego is built on our pain, trying to protect us from that. When we're vulnerable and we're willing to open it up and surrender the ego, that's actually how we dissipate the tension. That's how we heal our wounds. That's how we align with better practices that are gonna be more suitable. Everything in my work, we're working to calibrating situations where I'm not negatively affecting other people outside me. We're transforming things internally so that I'm not reacting or lashing out or doing these things outside of me that are gonna lead to bigger problems down the road. We're trying to neutralize the negative impact we have on others. And because there's these ideas of like, in order for me to get what I want, I have to walk all over other people and those types of things. So basically, we dismantle a lot of those belief patterns so that our actions can be aligned for a higher good, where I can pursue what I want and I don't have to do any damage along the way. As we get in tune with our heart, we start to naturally act that way, but it's our mind that has these beliefs that I need to have all these strategies to manipulate situations to get what I want. And that's what causes a lot of pain and a lot of problems. So that's what we're really seeking to take a look at here. Anything with the ego, it's the foundation's kind of set in childhood to adapt in certain ways in order to be taken care of and maintain our safety in those environments. Some of that stuff might not be optimal. Some of that stuff might be sabotaging our life and might be sabotaging our relationships. A big one in childhood is like if you do something wrong and you admit it, you get punished for it. That's where lying starts. That's where all that stuff starts is this, well, I don't want to get punished. It could just be you being a kid, just having fun. But if you had serious parents around you that fun wasn't allowed, anything could be seen as bad. We learn to escape the truth and we start to, fabricate stories and we start to learn to hide in certain ways in order to still get what we want. That's where we learn to manipulate is, well, given this situation, I can't just say this is what I want. I have to play these games in order to get it. Let's say, so if you're punished for being wrong, that's where we're going to be avoiding responsibility. I'm going to redirect whatever the attention is. So that's where we start blaming other things, making excuses, blaming other people. We're trying to redirect the attention so that we don't get punished. But the thing is, as long as that's going on, we're stagnating ourselves and we're actually moving backwards because it's like we need that information to learn and grow from. But if I'm not bringing it into myself and reworking it, then I'm just training myself in manipulation patterns rather than truths. So that's always going to lead to problems down the road. what might start innocent today is over time, if I continue that behavior, it's going to come back at me in a bigger form. That's kind of this idea of karma that we could talk about. I think most people believe in some version of that, of cause and effect. And it makes a lot of sense. The way that happens is when you do these things, then you actually do feel shame and guilt. That gets internalized into your system. And then now it's like, I'm trying to resolve that shame and guilt. I need experiences to mirror back to me what I've done to other people. It's pretty trippy when you start to take a step back and zoom out, being like, oh, well, like I did this that one time, but then this person did it to me, but I'm upset with the other person. That's the ego trying to protect itself, being like, well, I'm perfect though. So we're not seeing our part in the equation. Oftentimes with clients bring that up. If they experience a repetitive pattern over and over again, one of the questions I ask is there a time in your life where you used to operate that way? The thing that you don't like about this other person. Generally, there's some insights there. Generally, because we're all at these different levels. So adults can be playing kind of kid games. Every step along the way, it's like we're trying to develop our consciousness meaning like I'm taking responsibility and I'm increasing my awareness of how I affect other people. There could be some things that are blind spots to me that I'm not quite seeing. I need to see those in other people. And if I have a reaction to other people, that's showing me what's unresolved within myself. So that's kind of a high level game that we work out in our sessions is, well, this keeps showing up. So is it trying to show you something? Is it a mirror for you? Is there something we need to learn here so that we can unpack the guilt and shame from the time you originally started to be that way? But it's super interesting work. Anytime we feel resistance, anytime we want to avoid something, there is something to learn there. And it's generally like that's just our ego trying to protect us. In order to move forward, we generally have to face the ego and we have to be vulnerable and we have to work to dissolve the protection mechanism that it's built up over our lifetime, because that's the thing that keeps creating problems and drama. Really, when you start to look at these things at a deeper level, we restore your mindset back to truth and authenticity. That starts to dissolve all these strategies you've used that might produce some sort of results, but it's also comes with the side problems. We're trying to just create from a clean place where it's not creating all these side problems.
Sure. You made me think of, I'm pretty sure it's called the fundamental attribution error. And you just described it differently, but it is this idea of how in certain situations where we're judging or disliking somebody else's behavior, we're holding them to a standard we don't hold ourselves to. So we give ourselves sort of the idea of like, well, I had the best of intentions, and so it's fine, but this other person with the same behavior, we're not giving them the same benefit of the doubt for their intentions. We immediately sort of assign ill intent. That's the idea behind it, is like, to your point of the mirror or whatever, just another way to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's super interesting stuff, but when you do zoom out, like all this stuff is pretty clear. But the thing is, it's
Yeah.
like whatever is going on in our mind, that's very personal to us. And a lot of times we can't see things for ourselves that we see in other people. A lot of people we struggle with, we're like, oh, if they would just make this change, like things would get better. They're in the same boat where they're trying to sort it out themselves. And that's why like a third party helps a lot of times, where you can be objective and kind of pointing things out to somebody, being like, hey, I don't know if you're aware of this, but this is what I'm seeing here. And do you see how that could lead to problems? A lot of things we're just too close to them to sort out for ourselves. That's the importance of reflection, meditation, things like that, is we're trying to create some space so that we can see things differently. Because if I've taken something and I've personalized it and now I make it my identity, it's very difficult to see outside that lens now, because I believe that this thing is like part of who I am. It's like inseparable. Part of this work is questioning that so that we can actually separate out those aspects of you that were built on pain, which is going to be creating these side problems. It's showing up in your world, but you're not able to see it because it's too close to you. It's like an integrated part of you. We actually have to kind of reverse that process of like, hey, you only like learn to be this way because of all this painful stuff. So if we let go of the pain, you can actually let go of this identity too. You don't have to live that way for the rest of your life because it is causing you problems. and it's probably damaging things around you and you're not even aware of it. It's very fascinating to kind of see this, and that's what's like interesting when you do this work long enough. Everything literally is patterns, and you're just like, well, yeah, this is a that level of coping strategy. This would be our next step out of that. You start to see these things happen over and over again, just a million different ways, and there's always a way forward. And the answer is always, how can I surrender this pain? How can I update my mindset to see this differently where I'm not actually in this survival environment anymore, that I have a better version now, I'm safer, so I can start to soften my grip on these protection mechanisms, because that's what really causes pain and suffering is we're not leveling up. We're maintaining the same mindset throughout our life, and we might get bigger problems, but we're approaching it from a very like amateur mindset. Learning is really about unpacking your pain and learning from it. And this creates this understanding which dissolves the tension and stress in the body too. So that's why the nervous system's always our feedback loop is, if I have tension and stress in the body, that's telling me that I've got some outdated software. That's telling me I've got some stuff that I'm holding on to that I'm trying to protect myself from. And the only way to really let that go or come to peace with it is to zoom out and depersonalize it. If I've personalized it, I need that space. And as I get that space, I can see it differently. And I can see how there's like a chain reaction and everything, that, oh, like this led to this, led to this. So I can kind of see the big picture, and then it feels less personal from that place. So if somebody hurt me, is probably because they were in pain to begin with. And if I take on their pain, now I'm just transferring it to other people too through these reactions. Basically, we're stopping that chain reaction and we're dismantling it so that we stop spreading the pain. But then it's also, we understand what happened to us at a deeper level, where we develop compassion, where we don't just like form these blanket thoughts about, I'm not good enough or I deserve bad things or whatever it is, because it's all built on that stuff. It's all built on those lies, because our mind just takes a snapshot of the stress and then it builds the story based on that. But it's really a bigger picture. And once we start to orient ourselves to that, now I'm understanding it better and I can start to release some of these things. Part of that process is this recognition of pain was done to me, and now I'm spreading that pain to other people. And well, it's just energy transference. So it's just, well, yeah, I'm holding on to this, and I got triggered, and now I had this reaction. Now I'm spreading the pain. We all do that in different ways. It's because I'm holding this stuff inside and it needs an outlet. But if I turn and face the pain, now I can start to transform it into wisdom. And that's really the key to navigating your life in a cleaner way, is understanding how these things happen. There is a lot of power in owning fault, and we could say it's also taking responsibility. This idea of vulnerability, that's our access point. Oftentimes, the things we keep close that we're not vulnerable about, those are things that we really struggle with. It's isolating. We feel like we're the only one with this problem and nobody understands us and nobody can help us. So we start to just continue to build this negative energy around this thing. That's generally through this form of shame, where I'm carrying the shame and I don't feel safe to show it to anybody, but I don't know how to solve it myself. That's why we have to open these things up, because literally it's the human experience. We all have similar struggles. Shame it's just something that makes it feel like it's unique to you and that you're a bad person for having it. So we have to be able to open that up to see that that's not actually the case. That's why support groups and things like that are pretty helpful. I'm not alone with this. Like, other people have the same struggles. And that's just the reality of being human. But admitting fault is an act of humility. It's this idea that I'm doing the best I can. I don't know everything. I don't have everything figured out, but I'm willing to learn. It displays emotional intelligence too, right? So people that have really numbed out their emotions or shut them down, they don't have these cues. When you'll notice people that are just kind of emotionally flooded, like, it's really hard to connect to them because, the conversation's dry. It doesn't flow. Like, there's nowhere for the energy to go because everything's so shut down. The vulnerability piece is what connects us. It starts to open that back up. So now that I can start to share who I really am and what I'm really struggling with, that gives me access to new solutions. That gives me access to people being able to help me or support me in different ways. Because as long as it's bound up in me, I'm just reacting from that constantly. And I'm afraid to show that to other people. That's really what's damaging to relationships. It causes this over time. We can ruin our best relationships because people start to lose respect for us because we're not willing to work on the thing that's destroying the relationship, right? We're pretending like it's not an issue because we're afraid to show it to anybody. Some of these things can be very painful, very heavy, and it's very difficult to carry on your own. I think that's one of the great things with like the internet and social media, not like you have people sharing stuff constantly, so you feel less alone. We do need the human connection. It's not just through a screen all the time. We need to actually interact in our life on a human level. It's this ability to be like, well, if I'm struggling with this, odds are somebody else is or has. And if somebody has and they've gotten through to the other side, they probably have some wisdom to share for me that might help me through it. It's just kind of knowing that we're not always meant to find all our answers. It's generally through other people is where we start to get things moving and start to open up our mind so that we can see these things differently. And that's really a big purpose of this podcast is to just kind of share all these different dynamics. Well, it's just common stuff. It's just a lot of things people don't regularly talk about, but regardless, it gets hardwired into your system and then you build the story about yourself on it. That's what holds you back in life is this inability to open these things up and to move forward. We want to cling to them. We want to make them our identity. We want to build this victim story around them or the reason why it's okay for me to hurt other people. It doesn't help as long as it's staying in that form. It is like we're just causing problems for other people every step of the way. But I think everybody has a limit to that where your family or people you're close to will probably tolerate it longer than maybe an acquaintance or somebody that you don't know as well. But the thing is like those are the aspects that when somebody's not looking at these things and it's the same problem over and over again, that's kind of when everybody starts to tolerate it less. You stop getting invited to things or people start talking behind your back or whatever. But it's just because, it's very clear there's an issue, but you're not willing to look at it. There's so much help available now that there's like less and less of an excuse because it's just like, well, we've all been through things. We've all really struggled. And there are time periods where it's like, okay, I can have this phase, but do we make that phase our entire life? Right. That's the big key there is like, it doesn't have to be a lifelong story. It can just be a period. It's always going to come back to if I take responsibility for my own well-being, that's going to open that door to transforming these things to a healthier place. So, because a lot of people that fear being alone, they adopt these behaviors where it makes nobody want to be around them. They might have volatile emotions. They might be manipulative, play games, things like that, because they fear being alone. They're trying to manipulate pieces to keep people around them. But that's the stuff that makes people move away from them. When we have a fear, we generally, and we're too attached to it, generally we start to create the circumstances that prove that fear correct. We're going to start to draw that experience to us because of our inability to change. And the change is this idea of like, okay, if I leave the pain in the same form as like when I was a 5-year-old and I live on that for the rest of my life, well, part of me is functioning like a 5-year-old. That's not the process of life. That's just our mind being stuck. And so it's really about kind of seeing it. We're maturing emotions. That's what we're doing here. If I'm able to look at that situation and see it differently, now I'm starting to mature myself so that I can take greater responsibility for things. And once I have that responsibility, now I have access to change everything in my life that I don't like. So as long as I bring it into myself, where can I improve? Where can I do better? It's going to be through the emotional work related to that topic where part of me got left behind and I'm not able to move past some stuff. That's what stagnated me. So it's really about our ability to take responsibility for transforming these things because the natural order of life is to continuously change with the permission to evolve. So evolve is we're always changing. And if you're resisting change, that's creating problems for you. Like everything in the universe does move all the time, but we stagnate things and we stop the energy flow and we just leave it in a place 10, 20 years ago. And we expect everybody else to adapt to that. That's not okay because we're the ones that's hung up. So it's just taking a look at these things through a different lens and then knowing that any of these things can be conquered. You can work through them. It just takes that willingness to admit fault. It takes that willingness to surrender the ego. I don't need to hold on to this for the rest of my life. I can heal it. It's finding the safety in that of like there are people that want to help. You have to let other people help you. So that's a big piece.
Letting other people help, just as you said, that can be very difficult at times. The building that trust with somebody, letting them in, letting them help you, that can be scary for a lot of people. I don't know if you want to say more about that, but as you were saying that, I was a little bit like, well, that could be a place where somebody really resists this kind of work of, yeah, no, I don't trust. And
It goes back to similar ideas. Like, why don't I trust to begin with, right? It's probably betrayal, been let down a lot. I relied on somebody and they weren't there for me, that type of thing. Or even worse, like I was vulnerable with somebody and then they use that information against me. That's another one. There's reasons for everything. There's reasons why it is difficult to trust. And what we try to really do here is restore self-trust so that you can align with the people that will be supportive for you. Because, yeah, not everybody's a good support. We do have to be selective. We have to find safe people, and people can be misleading too. When we're talking about relationship, generally it's like, oh, we tend to like rush the process where if something resonates with me now, I don't give it the space to reveal more to me. I usually just dive right in, and then that's where I get caught up because I trusted this person too fast. Rather than like allowing them to show me who they are. That's things we need to experience people different ways over a span of time. And what we're looking for is consistency. We're looking for are they who they say they are? Because the trick is like anybody can say anything they want. Some people are very good at manipulating and lying and putting on this facade. And that's why I think it's fair to, I don't know if like skeptical is the right or guarded's the right word, but it's like skeptical is a good thing. Well, I've been around the block long enough to know that yeah, people have ulterior motives. They have an agenda. They have these things that they need to work out. I need to give the space for people to reveal themselves to me over time. That's part of building a business too. I've been doing videos for years. I'm just trying to show consistency because that's to earn trust. Everything should be that way where, yeah, you kind of just need to see somebody over a span of time that's where over time, as we gain that trust, now that's where I can be more vulnerable as I trust this person is safe. You don't just go on a first date and you like spill everything the first day. It's like to build a healthy relationship over time. As I get to know this person better, I start to see that they presented this version of them, but then I'm seeing some of these flaws, the red flags, and everybody has them. It's just how dominant are those red flags? Is that going to control the person or are they willing to surrender those? It's just that everything is kind of a dating process. I need to get to know this person at increasingly deeper levels. As I feel safer with them, now it's like I have this ability to share more with them. And that's where the vulnerability starts to get dialed up is I feel like I can trust this person because I've seen them handle all these different situations. I see how they show up consistently. I see how they treat people, those types of things. Because there's the image that we present to the world, but then there's the real image and we all have this kind of darker side that we're still working on. And very rarely is somebody got it all figured out in every area where they've worked through all that darkness. We all have these unconscious things. It's somebody that's willing to look at that stuff is important. Somebody that's like willing to admit their faults once again, where it's just like, yeah, like I could be better here. They might react initially, but then they're willing to apologize too. I reacted, I'm working on this. I understand this is like something that I can do better. It's that ability to just stick with it. I might have the initial stuff, but then I'm able to do the work on the back end to clean it up. And I think that earns a lot of respect too. Because I think many of us grew up in households where, maybe there was a huge outburst or some big problem. And then 5 seconds later, everyone just pretends like it didn't happen. That's like almost worse because you're just like, well, now I'm walking on eggshells all the time because it's just like, what's happening here? This big thing happened, but then everybody's avoiding it. And so all these things are kind of reasons for why we adapt these strategies. It's just kind of knowing that if we want to make progress, it does take building relationships with ourselves to create more self-trust. It takes getting to know people at a deeper level and actually being like interested in other people too. Many of us get pretty wrapped up in our problems where maybe we're just talking about ourselves all the time and we're not actually connecting with another person. When we're talking about balancing out relationships, we view it as an exchange and we want to view it as more of an even exchange. And that might mean I might go through some phases where, yeah, I may be struggling with things more. I may be more stressed out. And so I might need extra support for that time period. But as I get through that, maybe the other person in a relationship goes through their phase where I support them a little bit more. It all should kind of balance out in some way at the end because that's where we keep ourselves from forming like the bitterness and resentment. Because if it's an unbalanced relationship, that's where that starts to come in, is where it's not going to be this consistent giving and receiving all the time, but it should add up over time to be pretty balanced.
I'm sure everyone has experienced, well, maybe not everyone, maybe that's too broad of a way to say that, but a lot of people have probably experienced the when a relationship starts to get good or close or however you want to think about it. And it is often on the backside of those vulnerable moments, not just in what you share, but maybe it is in the admitting the fault, apologizing for having hurt someone, committing to making a difference, something like that. So let's just maybe talk about how many benefits you can gain through this admitting fault in terms of relationships.
This idea of conflict resolution, it's super important because it's when we have tension in a relationship and then we work to resolve it, that strengthens the relationship. And when the tension's there and we avoid it, that makes the relationship worse. Like, cause like I'm getting further disconnected from the other person. When we acknowledge that the tension's there, number one, and then we try to open it up and we try to work with the person and we're willing to own our parts of it, meaning like, yeah, I'm contributing in these ways. These are things I'm working on. I can improve. And the other person's willing to do the same. That's really how we develop intimacy. And it doesn't have to be just simply romantic. That is this idea of like trust. They always break down the word intimacy into like, into me, I see. It's this, you're revealing aspects of yourself. And that's how you deepen a relationship with somebody, is like you're showing them more and more of your truth. When we're able to own our part and work through it and actually do the things we say we're going to do, and that means like we admit fault, we work to reconcile that within ourselves to do it better next time. That's part of making mistakes. Oh, I recognize I could do better here. And so I'm going to work on that and it's going to improve over time. And that's saying is it's adjusting expectations so we don't expect somebody to change dramatically overnight because that's fake. Everything is a bit of a process where, especially if I have a lot of struggles in a certain area, that is going to take time to work that through. But it's that consistency of working at it and seeing the progress. That's what really helps earn trust, is people seeing that. And it invites compassion too, because we all have similar things we've struggled with. And so you're just kind of showing your humanness. You're showing that, I can do better here. And that starts to create the person's like more willing to help and support you through that if you're in that place. I don't think we're all meant to do it alone. I think society used to be a lot more community based. People would all help each other out. Everybody's got their different strengths, everybody's got their different weaknesses. And if you're in your weakness a good portion of the time, like that's going to be creating a lot of problems. We're all better when we can focus on the things we're good at, but then there are some crossovers where we do need to improve on some things. I think inviting that support is part of just being real about it, being completely honest and not trying to avoid or to glaze over things, because that's where people, they can't trust us anymore because we're not being honest about the situation. That's a huge disconnect in relationships. When we dissolve the tension, when we actually work through it, when we admit fault, when we put the work in to improve it, and we do that consistently, there's very few relationships that, as long as both people are doing some version of that, that's going to get stronger over time. The disconnects are generally from maybe one person wanting to work on things and the other person wanting to avoid them, right? They might be stuck in their ego, they might be in the stubbornness. A big part of growing in a relationship is both people wanting to work towards a common good. That's filtered through this realization that we all have things that we could do better. And so and that's the compassion piece is I can really the more I'm not functioning from shame, the more I develop self-compassion, the more I can give people the benefit of the doubt, the more I can give them that wiggle room to kind of realize that, hey, it's okay. I need you to work on these things, but I don't expect it overnight. You kind of give them that space. Then if they need help and support, that they're willing to ask for it too. That's really how you're going to develop a strong relationship is through continuously working out the conflicts. That's just both people working towards the common good. And it's built on a mutual respect for one another too. If I'm not respecting the other person, then it's just going to be like, well, I'm going to try and dominate the relationship. I'm just going to act based on my impulses. If I'm aware and conscious that, like, hey, the things I'm doing is affecting this other person, then that's where we start to, I don't want to do that. So I respect them. I'm going to work to make things better. It's just kind of this dance that we have. And it is always about having willing participants. If we have one-sided relationships in our life, you have to ask, like, is this person willing to make some changes? Are they willing to hold themselves accountable or do they take responsibility for things? And if they're not, I almost have to accept the relationship as is. And I have to know that I might have to limit it in certain ways because if this person's operating in their weaknesses, that could damage me potentially. So I might just appreciate people for who they are in certain areas, but it's also that's not going to be this true connection. It's just going to be, well, I trust them here, but I don't trust them over here. I think we have those mixtures of people where if somebody's in their strength, you're like, yeah, I can trust them. If they're not, then it's just like, well, yeah, I stay away from that. And that's learning how to navigate life better. In the professional setting, if we have like an athletic team or at a corporation, we're talking about culture, generally a culture of accountability that allows us to grow stronger teams and work through problems faster, right? Because people are willing to have the hard conversations to get on the same page. So that's why feedback's important. People that have this freedom to speak their mind respectfully. It's just like everything starts to benefit when we get back to reality. We see, hey, the tension's here. We're not going to ignore it. So let's put it out on the table and let's sort through it. Because every time we do that, we have this opportunity to grow. When you go through that process, that is what gains respect. That's what earns trust. That's what makes people feel safe. Because people don't feel safe when you're ignoring problems because they're like, oh, this person's in their weakness. I can't trust them here. So now I don't feel safe around them because I feel like it's going to hurt me in some way. It creates safety as well when we admit fault, when we're willing to work on these things to come to better solutions. Yeah, it's about respect. It's about understanding that I have my part in this world and there's people around me and it may unconsciously be affecting people in negative ways. Part of that might be of their own making, part of it might be of my making, right? And so we're always just looking to own our part in it to see, hey, like what can I do to balance this out? Or do I need to have a conversation to bring something to their awareness that maybe they're not seeing? Because sometimes we might try to help people or we might try to resolve a situation, but the other person's not actively participating in that or they're not willing to see certain things. And then that kind of leaves us at a dead end. So it's bringing awarenesses to people and it's allowing them that space to figure out what they're going to do with that. And if you keep seeing the same thing over and over again, that's where we have to dial up our communication or set boundaries, in order to protect ourselves. These are all like kind of fluid dynamics. Everything's always shifting and changing. And it's about me continuously rebalancing myself so that I can be consistent. So people feel safe and kind of I can connect with people freely that are willing to connect, that aren't super blocked and shut down. And if somebody's blocked and shut down, I can try and create some awareness there, but ultimately it's their choice. So it's about kind of scanning your environment and understanding what you're working with and doing the best you can with it.
Anybody who's listened to this podcast for a few episodes will know that sort of the next place we're going, right? Or what are the small steps that someone listening could start taking to practice admitting fault in different situations and working towards that vulnerability and better relationships?
It's always The first one is going to be start small. So we're not just going to like dive headfirst into a relationship that's a huge mess or something like that. It's more of, well, yeah, what are some things that I may have done that are small that seemed insignificant that maybe I avoided or maybe had told like a white lie about or something like that? What are some small areas where I can just come to truth that would get some of that guilt off my chest, right? Because that's really it's just like the small steps turn into bigger steps where as we start to live more in integrity, our tolerance for being out of integrity starts to increase. So we want to build up to it. So it takes with the small steps of like admitting I'm wrong or sorry I reacted here, cleaning up the small stuff so that you can feel how that you can try that on and see how that feels. Yeah, why did I lie about that? That was stupid. That didn't really even matter. But it's like once we get those small wins of like, oh, I just kind of cleared my conscience there and that feels pretty good. That's what helped us want to take the bigger steps of like, oh, this relationship where maybe I've just been like people pleasing, or maybe I've just been going along with these things I don't agree with. Maybe I need to plant my feet there, and maybe I need to communicate something. We want to build up to the bigger stuff where it starts to just be kind of how we carry ourselves is based on more truth. Another one would be like asking people for feedback about stuff too. How do you view me? Like what those types of exercises are kind of interesting because you get to see how like people perceive you because we're all in our own little world here. And it can be kind of difficult to come to grasp with things. But if we ask like the five closest people to you, how would you describe me or what do you feel like my best character traits are or what are some things I need to work on, things like that. You start getting some like data where you start to see like a number of the same pieces line up. It's just like, oh, there might be some truth to that. Everybody has their own perception, so we don't just take it blindly. Well, if I'm seeing common threads here, maybe there's something for me to look at a little bit deeper here so that I might be like a little disconnected from, where I might not be aware of certain things that I'm doing that are affecting other people. The first part, when we go to gain this ability to admit fault, is first we want to find clarity. We want to identify what part is truly ours. So we all do projection, meaning like I have a wound and I don't want to feel it or look at it. And so I place it on another person. I might blame them. So sometimes people blame us for things we didn't actually do. So it's trying to find that clarity of like, okay, what's really mine to own here? What could I have actually done better? How could I have approached this thing differently? And just kind of searching for that because that's about aligning with some corrective actions that are going to prevent problems in the future. Second is ownership. We take responsibility without excuses. The ego wants to make excuses, it wants to justify everything, but there's nothing wrong with saying, like, hey, I was wrong here. And you can even expand on that and be like, well, hey, this is what I was thinking. This is what I was going through at the moment in terms of what led up to that. But we're not dismissing what we did. It's more of we're trying to create an understanding so that we can get back on the same page. That's the ownership piece and then just kind of share what you were going through so that you can start to that's the vulnerability piece on the back end of it. The vulnerability piece is to open it up to a broader discussion where it helps people understand us a little bit better, and that starts to dissolve tension too, because otherwise our mind's just filling in the gaps. If there's something that doesn't make sense to me, I'm still not going to trust, I'm still not going to feel connected to this person. But if I get some clarity on like some of the behind the scenes stuff, that might start to explain things where it's just like, oh, okay, I can see what they were going through. And the third piece is going to be repair. So that's going to be about expressing what you'll do differently. So we own it. And then it's just like, okay, moving forward, this is what I'm working on in order to create a better result in the future. That's part of building trust too, is people need to see that follow through where they can see consistent actions that's leading to progress. It's not about admitting fault and then getting into a submissive mode. It's about being proactive about it. I'm going to admit fault, but then it's like, I'm going to take a path forward that's actually going to make me stronger, not weaker. If I'm getting weakened by it, it's because I'm carrying shame. It's like I'm making myself out to be a bad person because of this. And it's just like you made a mistake, but so let's do better. And that can actually create growth and make you stronger and clearer and more connected. We want to take that route with it as we go to clean these things up. Along with those corrective actions, we always include some prompts here to kind of just sit with yourself and just think a little bit deeper about things. We're trying to get more in tune with how we're showing up. Some good prompts to reflect on would be, where in my life am I clinging to being right? So the ego needs to be right. It's always in that place of trying to prove itself right or correct. And that could even mean if we're way out of bounds. It could mean if I'm really operating from some pain, it still is trying to justify why I'm doing things. So where am I clinging to this idea that I need to protect that image? We want to do this in a quiet space, and we want to be able to reflect on it because we're trying to create some space in order to see that. Because if I'm just all worked up about it and I think about it, then I might just kind of spin on this idea of like, well, I am right here. But there is always kind of, you may be mostly right, but there might still be some adjustments there. We're scanning for what could I do better? That's the whole purpose of this thing. And so the next one would be, what relationship could I shift if I admitted my role? You see a lot of this with families. There's just like a lifetime of stuff that's built up. We can always point at the other person and the things that they've done, but a lot of the things they've done is also in response to how we're showing up and our part in it. There's two sides to every story generally. Part of this is putting things on the table and getting real. And the only way we access that change is if we take the first step. Because if I'm creating the awareness and I'm doing this work, well, if I know my part, we look for opportunities to share that, to create that vulnerability to maybe open the door to change, or maybe there's some common ground we can build. So through stubbornness, a lot of relationships get destroyed. And many times these are just simply misunderstandings. It's just two people on different pages, and my mind is trying to fill in the gaps on why they did something they did, and I might not have that information. So that's creating that tension. I don't trust this person because these things don't make sense to me, or I did something, but I don't want to see that I did that. We're always just kind of scanning for, what are the pieces I can own that would bring this to a better place. We might not have a willing participant on the other side, and that's okay. All we're trying to do is clear our conscious and get to this better place with ourselves and align more with integrity. The next one would be, how can I reframe fault from failure to freedom? So once again, this is piggybacking on the ability to make mistakes. We don't see really things as failures. We see them as a process of like, this is how I'm going to learn. And if I'm willing to work through those things that I'm struggling with, that creates this emotional freedom. It clears the shame and guilt, but then, also it allows my mind to expand and open up to new things because I'm not locked in the past anymore. So as we work through these things, we're all human. We all make mistakes. We all have things we can do better. The only way we make them better is by addressing them, taking a deeper look, shifting how we relate to them, taking some new steps. And that's what really opens things up for us. That's what creates freedom, is you start to see anywhere where I'm emotionally hung up, I can take some steps today by actually starting to shift how I'm seeing that situation. And we're trying to see it in a way that neutralizes the negative emotion. So that means I'm depersonalizing it. I'm trying to zoom out rather than make it part of my identity. Anytime we have a lot of stubbornness, our ego is really wrapped up in that and it can't see any other way. So that's generally where we're probably going to need some outside support, somebody that can help show us these things and maybe create some accountability to be like, well, you haven't considered these aspects, because if something's really personal to us, we're only seeing it our way. And that's generally what creates the butting of the heads. It's about seeing these things differently. If I'm locked up emotionally, there's things I can do to loosen that and see the situation differently so I can get some forward movement going.
If we just want to put a bow on this conversation a little bit today, going through your kind of final thoughts on admitting fault and growing from that.
So admitting fault is it's under this idea that we all make mistakes. We're all doing the best we can with what we know. And we kind of stay in this place of ignorance if we're not willing to open that up. It's about just knowing that the byproduct of life is just misunderstandings happen, things happen, and we don't have to stay in that same place forever. So when we're able to admit the things we've done wrong, it starts to open doors. It starts to rebuild trust for us. It creates intimacy in relationships. People start to respect us more because we're not just burying our head in the sand. And ultimately, this all kind of adds up to us transforming the relationship to a better understanding of one another. When you own your mistakes, they really stop owning you. That's an important idea is the things that we internalize and bury, that stuff unconsciously motivates us, right? We start creating the things we fear. We start sabotaging the things we want because we have this guilt and shame locked inside. It's really about putting it on the table and honestly looking at it. And that's what always gives us the path forward, but it also frees us up a lot in order to make progress. So I encourage you to just kind of scan your life and just kind of see where are some opportunities where you can take some small steps and have some more ownership and responsibility. That might mean having some conversations with some people to clear the air. It is about surrendering the ego and setting these things aside because that's how we're ultimately going to make progress. So if you'd like to go deeper with me, you can visit my website, brandonthielk.com, and schedule a 30-minute strategy session. So we'll just talk through what you've got going on, and I'll share how this work can help you. And also, you can register for my newsletter on that page. Each Monday, I send out the lightning report, which includes things going on in the business, as well as some insights for the week and some reflection exercises. As you can tell, I'm super big on that. Also, coming up in October 25th, I'll be doing a live event in the Madison, Wisconsin area. So if you want to experience this work in person, it'll be a day-long workshop. Half the day we'll be teaching some of these fundamentals and principles. And then also there will be a section for group coaching. So we all have similar issues, as I keep saying here. And sometimes we learn best through other people. Sometimes it's too personal for us where we can get insights into ourselves through seeing other people work on theirs. So it can be a pretty cool experience. I look forward to possibly seeing you. Please like, subscribe, and comment on anything you'd like to hear from us. Would love to support you in a bigger way. So just let me know how I can do that.
Yeah, for sure. All the links for all the ways to connect with Brandon will be in the show notes or in the YouTube description if you happen to be watching this on YouTube.
Well, thanks, guys. Well, we'll see you next time.
All right, talk to you later, Brandon.